and with it, May 10th, the one-year anniversary of one of the scariest moments in my life, my first stroke. There I was, in a house I had technically already moved out of, all alone, no one aware that I was there, and no phone service. Thank God I hadn't left my cell phone in my car, or things could have gone much worse. Of course, calling 911 on a cell phone doesn't give the dispatcher an instant pinpoint on your location like a landline does, so I had to try to explain what was happening and give my address in a slurred, barely controllable voice with a mouth that was half paralyzed. But the call was made, and I began the 1,000-mile journey across the living room to the front door to unlock it for the ambulance crew. You think it's hard crawling across the floor when you've had too much to drink? Try it when the entire right side of your body is inert dead weight. Somehow I managed to get to the door, throw the deadbolt, open the door far enough to unlatch the screen door, and then drag myself far enough away from the door to let someone through. I lay there quietly, strangely calm, and waited, hoping that the next person at the door would be one of the EMTs and not someone else.
Yes? Is it about the hedge? Look, I'm awfully sorry.
I am the Grim Reaper.
Who?
The Grim Reaper.
Yes, I see.
I am death.
Yes, well, the thing is, we've got some people from America for dinner tonight.
Who is it, darling?
It's a Mr. Death or something. He's come about the reaping. I don't think we need any at the moment.
At that moment, I didn't feel a need for any reaping either, and as good fortune would have it, I didn't get any. The Reaper comes for us all eventually. No one can evade him forever. That's just a natural part of the whole life cycle. But for most of us, he is an entirely unwelcome guest, and whether he's coming for us or for one of our friends or family, his visit is not anticipated with much enthusiasm. Death has been one of the greatest mysteries of life since humans and proto-humans became self-aware eons ago. As humans go, we have a hard time wrapping our heads around big abstract concepts, so the tendency in earlier times was to personify those concepts as individual characters. Death has been personified in many ways throughout every world culture since ancient times, but the character of the Grim Reaper as we know him can be traced to mid-14th century Europe during the time of the bubonic plague pandemic, or as it's popularly known, the Black Death. His skeletal countenance is an obvious reference to death, as this visage is the one we will all eventually assume. He's always draped in black, both the traditional Western color of funeral mourning and a suggestion of night and shadow. Death was always shown carrying a deadly weapon, either a sword, crossbow, or dart, but owing to the mass casualties of the Black Death, this was eventually replaced by the scythe, an agricultural tool, which was used to mow down vast swaths of humanity as if they were mere stalks of grain in a field. This frightening image truly portrayed death in a fearsome and villainous light, and thus was born the moniker of Grim Reaper, a dreaded harvester of souls. But over time, as the Black Death extinguished itself, apart from a few smaller-scale outbreaks, and the panic and despair quieted, the Reaper came to be regarded by many not as the actual agent of death, but as an assistant to the final process, that is to say, not the one responsible for killing you, but the one who waits to receive you once the true cause of your death finishes its course. Thus evolved the transition of the Grim Reaper from Slayer to Psychopomp in the public consciousness. What the hell is a Psychopomp, you might ask? Perhaps the Bestiary can shed a little light on the subject of Psychopomps. The word psychopomp means guide of souls and comes from the Greek psyche, which, depending on context, can mean breath, life force, mind, or soul, and pompous, which means guide. They are seen throughout history in virtually every culture and have been personified as gods, spirits, angels, demons, or even certain animals. Their job is to escort the spirit of the dead into the afterlife. Depending on the culture and mythology, the psychopomp may or may not hold the power of judgment over the person's soul in addition to conveying it to the other side. One of the earliest psychopomp characters is the Egyptian god Anubis. Anubis is actually a name given to him by the Greeks during the Hellenistic occupation of Egypt, and is a Greek version of his original name Inpu or Anpu. Usually depicted as a man with the head of a jackal, a wild dog similar to the American coyote, Anubis is seen in the earliest periods of Egyptian lore, dating back to around 3000 BC, and is widely regarded as one of the first and most important gods in the pantheon. He was the original Lord of the Underworld until Osiris replaced him in that role many centuries later, upon which he assumed the role of guardian of graves and the patron of embalmers. His physical countenance is probably due to the problem of jackals and other wild dogs digging up graveyards to get to the corpses. So, in the spirit of fighting fire with fire, a jackal was chosen as the grave's protector. Anubis is something of an anomaly in the pantheon, as while several shrines in his honor have been found, archaeologists have to this day been unable to find evidence of any temple dedicated to him. It is believed that every tomb and cemetery is considered a de facto temple of Anubis. While Anubis was revered as a guardian and guide of souls, he was also feared as he had the power of judgment over the dead. He would weigh each person's heart against the weight of a feather to determine if the deceased soul was pure enough to merit entry into the afterlife and enjoy a peaceful and happy eternal rest under his care and protection. If you failed the way in, instead of ushering you into heaven, he would feed you to the demon goddess Ammit, the devourer of souls. So be good for goodness sake. He was also a pretty vicious badass. When the god Set turned himself into a leopard to attack and kill Osiris, Anubis hunted him down, branded him, skinned him, and wore his pelt as a warning to any robbers and desecrators of graves. Definitely not someone to piss off. The ancient Greeks had a number of characters associated with death. While the actual god of death was Thanatos, the most well-known deity in the role of Psychopomp was the god Hermes, also known as Mercury by the Romans and Termes by the Etruscans of ancient Italy. Hermes filled a number of roles, and in his role of the messenger, he was the one deity that could freely travel between the land of the living and the underworld of Hades. He was, therefore, the one individual that could actually deliver a soul there and return. An interesting cross-cultural hybridization of gods occurred in Hellenistic Egypt when Anubis was blended with Hermes, creating Hermanubis, who came to represent the Egyptian priesthood and engaged in the investigation of truth. Another well-known Greek figure is Charon, the ferryman. The rivers Styx and Acheron were said to be the border that separated Hades from the land of the living, and if you weren't escorted to Hades directly by Hermes, you had to cross the river in Charon's boat. There's some dispute, however, over whether or not Charon can be considered a true psychopomp, because first, he didn't show up to collect the spirit of the dying. They had to find their way to the river themselves or be led there by Hermes. Secondly, he didn't take you across for free. You had to pay him. The dead in Greece were buried with an obol, a silver coin, to take with them as payment for Charon. If you couldn't pay, you didn't get a ride and were forced to wander the banks of the river for 100 years. I haven't been able to find any reference to what happened after the 100 years were up. Did you get a ride after that, or were you still expected to pay? And if the latter, how the hell exactly were you supposed to come up with the money when you were already dead? I'm sure there weren't very many part-time jobs available on the banks of the river Styx, and if someone died with an extra coin, you'd have to get in line behind all the other deadbeats who wanted it. Mythology just has too many loose ends. In the Abrahamic religions of Judaism and Islam, the angel associated with death is the archangel Azrael. While there is no mention of him in the biblical scriptures, he can be found in writings of Jewish mysticism like the Enoch Scroll. Azrael is said to visit the dying and deliver their souls into the arms of God. There's no mention of Azrael in Christian scripture. This function is instead attributed to the archangel Michael, the guardian and warrior. In addition to being commander of the armies of guardian angels who will fight Satan's legions in the Battle of Armageddon, Michael also frees the souls of the virtuous who are trapped in the earthly realm and guides them to the light. In Haitian and Louisiana voodoo, the supreme creator, Bandai, is distantly separated from his earthly creation, and all spiritual intervention is handled by spirits called Loa. The family of Loa in charge of death are the Gede, who are led by the four barons and Mama Brigitte. The chief Loa among them is Baron Samedi, the ruler of the grave. When someone dies, Baron Samedi digs their grave and greets their soul on the other side. There are several psychopomps among the Gedes serving under the barons, including Papa Gede, the first man who ever died, his brother Gede Babako, and Gede Nebo, the first murder victim, who protects and guides the souls of people who die by violence. Not all psychopomps are individual characters. In the Brittany region of France, and to some extent in Wales and Cornwall in the UK, the Ankou, protector of graveyards and king of the dead, is a figure similar to the Grim Reaper, but every parish in Brittany has one of its own. A shapeshifter, the Ankou will appear as a tall, gaunt man in a hooded cloak, a skeleton wearing a broad-brimmed hat and carrying a scythe, or even a mere shadow. He either walks along the road or drives a cart pulled by 4 black horses, and comes to the houses of the dying to collect their souls. Every year, the last person to die in a parish will become the Anku for the duration of the following year. One belief that crosses many cultures is the idea of the dying being visited and guided by dead family or loved ones. This may or may not even be something codified in a culture's folklore. All over the world, people on their deathbed often claim that a previously dead relative is in the room with them. The final hour of death can be understandably frightening to someone who has not yet reached the final stage of acceptance, and a person may be unwilling to let go. It is very comforting to be greeted by a long-lost loved one offering solace and guidance into the light. Not all psychopomps are of supernatural or celestial origin. In shamanic cultures, a shaman performs death rites to prepare the spirit of the dying for their final journey to the afterlife and send them on their way along the path. Many types of animals are considered to be guides as well. Dogs, for example, are held in high regard in most of the world due to their loyalty and faithful companionship, as well as their tracking ability and their knack for being able to find their way home. In Indo-European cultures, the dog was therefore seen as a natural choice for spirit guide to faithfully accompany the departed soul to his destination. Birds are also commonly seen in this role, as the ability to fly far away into the heavens and out of sight would suggest a perfect escort for a spirit on its way to the other world. Much imagery from ancient Japan shows the significance of birds as psychopomps. In the West, crows and ravens are associated with death for obvious reasons. They're carrion eaters. These birds would flock to the battlefields once the action stopped. Many believed they were there to convey the souls of the slain to the afterlife, a much more pleasant concept than what they were actually there for. Native Americans believed that owls carried away the spirits of the dead. Their love of night, haunting cry, and silent flight made them seem truly like supernatural beings. Tribal chiefs, however, were spirited away not by owls, but by powerful and majestic birds of prey like hawks and eagles. Norse culture revered horses in many ways, and the horse was seen as, among other things, a powerful psychopomp, and many people were buried with their horses so they could ride them into the afterlife. It is theorized that even bees may have been considered psychopomps in some parts of ancient Greece, as bees appear prominently in Mycenaean tomb decorations, and some entire tombs were shaped like beehives. Death and funerary imagery are central staples of haunting. Our graveyards are often the central feature in our haunts. But aside from the stones, gates, and tombs, let's not forget those extra symbols and characters that have been such an important aspect of life's last journey throughout history. Some of the images and animals featured in funeral scenes make a lot more sense when you understand just what their significance is, and some of these mythological and folkloric figures can even become major players in a themed haunt or its backstory. So have fun finding ways to work psychopomps into your haunt story. And don't fear the Reaper. He's just here to help you on your way. Or maybe he wants more cowbell. From the pages of the Bestiary, I'm Revenant, and you are listening to Hauntcast.
I'm going now. Heaven help you.
Please like and follow the podcast. Stalk us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Links in the description. And help us by sharing Hauntcast with all your haunted Halloween brethren. Until next time, stay scary.